We're going to begin. I'm calling the meeting to order. Good afternoon, everyone. This is meeting number 9. As stated on the agenda, we have the Department of Public Works and Government Services with Mr. Sobrino, who is with us today, and Mr. Gray. And this has to do with the study of the mandate and activities of the Build in Canada Innovation Program. So, as usual, I will give you some time, about 10 minutes, in order to make your presentation. And then the members of the committee will ask you questions to our two representatives of Public Works and Government Services. So without further delay, go ahead, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm very pleased to reappear before you today to discuss the Build in Canada Innovation Program, which the last time I appeared was known as the Canadian Innovation Commercialization Program. I am Pablo Sobrino, the Associate Assistant Deputy Minister for Acquisitions Branch at Public Works Government Services, and I am accompanied by Mr. Desmond Gray, who is the Acting Director General, who's overseeing both the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises and the Strategic Engagement, as well as the Services and Specialized Acquisition Management sector of Acquisitions Branch. The Canadian Innovation Commercialization Program, or CICP, was launched as a pilot program in Budget 2010. It was created to bolster innovation in Canada's business sector. The program helps companies to bridge the pre-commercialization gap by procuring and testing late-stage innovative goods and services within federal departments and agencies. The feedback they receive during testing helps businesses to move their innovations to the marketplace. For a small pilot, the CICP was well received, with 967 proposals from businesses across Canada and 84 innovations pre-qualified for testing. Le programme a également été appuyé.
The program has also seen support from other parties, including this committee. An OGGO report released in November 2011 entitled Effectiveness of the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises and the Canadian Innovation Commercialization Program recommended that Public Works and Government Services Canada consider making the Canadian Innovation Commercialization Program permanent. In addition, an expert panel on research and development, chaired by Mr. Tom Jenkins, also recommended making the CICP permanent as part of their October 2011 report entitled Innovation Canada, A Call to Action. The report, which examined how to strengthen the impact of federal investments in support of a more innovative economy, further noted that programs such as the CICP could be used to develop capabilities essential to Canada's emerging defense and security needs.
Following these recommendations, and to build on the early success of the pilot program, Budget 2012 committed to making the program permanent and to add a military procurement component, which will be phased in gradually. By 2016, the program will be allocated $40 million annually, with funding split evenly between the standard and military components. The permanent program was renamed the Build in Canada Innovation Program, or BCIP, to better market the program to Canadian businesses and government departments. The BCIP will continue to work with Canadian businesses to match their innovative goods and services with federal departments and agencies to provide testing and feedback. J'aimerais maintenant prendre un moment pour vous dire.
Now I would like to take a moment to briefly outline some of the details of the program.
Approach to its calls for proposals, referred to as a supply push approach, with broad priority areas allowing Canadian businesses to propose an innovation without specifically knowing where it will be tested. This approach is effective because businesses are able to propose an innovation based on its features and benefits rather than strictly in response to a pre-identified need. This is particularly beneficial to small and medium enterprises, as well as businesses in regions where government does not have a large presence, because they do not need to possess extensive knowledge of government and its needs in order to participate in the program. Les quatre domaines prioritaires.
The 4 broad priority areas of the standard component of the program are environment, health, safety and security, and enabling technologies. The newly added military component which was introduced in the fourth call for proposals that just recently launched on November 21st, includes a single priority area, protecting the soldier. As the military component is phased in over time and its budget expands, future calls for proposals will introduce additional priority areas.
Process requires Canadian businesses to submit information on their innovations, their business plan, and their testing requirements. The evaluation process is completed in 3 stages. The first stage of the evaluation is completed by Public Works Government Services Canada, and it serves to verify whether each proposal is in compliance with the mandatory criteria. These include whether the business is Canadian, whether the proposed innovation includes 80% Canadian content, and is at the appropriate stage of development for the program. And lastly, whether the proposal is under $500,000 for a standard component and under $1 million for the military component. Les propositions conformes passent à la...
Those that are compliant move forward to the second stage of the evaluation, which involves reviewing how innovative the technology is, the company's business plan, the innovation's testing plan, and the benefits of the innovation to Canada. This stage of the evaluation is carried out by the National Research Council's Industrial Research Assistance Program. Upon completing their evaluations, IRAP provides Public Works and Government Services Canada with a ranking of proposals from highest scoring to lowest.
By an innovation selection committee, which is comprised mostly of private sector experts with relevant experience in innovation and commercialization. This selection committee reviews the top-ranked proposals to validate the conclusions of the second stage of evaluation. This committee's 2011 report noted a concern with the membership of the committee and the level of access it has to business information, or businesses' information. In response, our department has introduced a number of measures to ensure the integrity of this committee. Tout d'abord, nous avons intégré les entrepreneurs.
First, we have integrated entrepreneurs in residence from universities across Canada into the committee's membership to provide a balance of academic and private sector expertise. Entrepreneurs in residence are executives that bring real-world business expertise to academic programs. They bring a unique perspective that balances private and public interests. Second, to protect bidders' information, members of the selection committee are required to sign non-disclosure and conflict of interest agreements. Third, members are requested to recuse themselves from reviewing a proposal should they feel there is a real or perceived conflict.
The selection committee, PWGSC selects the highest-ranked proposals based on available funding for that call for proposals. These bidders are notified of their pre-qualification, and then we begin to search for a federal department or agency to test, evaluate, and provide feedback on their innovation. To support this search, the program works with pre-qualified businesses to identify potential test departments and to facilitate communications. For innovations submitted under the military component of the program, there will be a Defense Validation Committee comprised of personnel from the Department of National Defense, which will help to identify the most suitable organizations within their department to carry out testing. Once a pre-qualified innovation and a test department are matched, contract negotiations begin, and the specific details of testing are worked out between the business and the applicable department. In some cases, negotiations will take into account the size and scope of the proposed test and the capability or capacity of the department to accommodate it. The final step is issuing a contract which defines the final costs, the timelines, and expected testing outcomes. It is important to note that not every pre-qualified innovation is guaranteed a contract. Contracts are only issued when a test department is identified and terms of a contract can be agreed to. To date, we've awarded 67 contracts to Canadian businesses. And that concludes my presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Merci pour votre présentation. Donc, on va passer.
Thank you for your presentation. So we will now go to questions from the committee members, and we're going to start with Mr. Martin for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll take the first round. I may not use my entire 5 minutes, but I'm interested in the development or the progress of what was the Canadian Innovation Commercialization Program, and what seems to be sort of a creep or a drifting, if you will, of focus towards the military. Your one question or your one comment I'd like you to flesh out a bit. You say the funding will be split equally between the military and the other priorities. Does that mean 50% for the military and 16% for each of the other three, or 25% each in your four categories of priority?
For the total program, 50% of the program will go to the military, and the other 50% across the standard components. Yes.
Get to divvy up what's left.
Yeah. And that program will be fully funded in 2016-17.
I guess I'm wondering the rationale, how this develops. I mean, the last thing the world needs is more people building weapons. I mean, the military-industrial complex is pretty well served by some pretty big actors. I'm just wondering how throwing $1 million at a local startup arms builder in Canada is going to be able to compete with Raytheon. I mean, I had to look up a phone number at Raytheon one time, and there's like 80 pages in their phone book of people and departments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, so that's the first question is, just what is the rationale behind trying to jump into the arms race? And secondly, I suppose, is what obligation is there to buy Canadian afterwards? My experience with the Canadian military buying Canadian has been appalling. Let me give you an example to help you answer this question. Canada, the Canadian military needed some troop carriers, and we make the best buses in the world, arguably, in Winnipeg. So they needed 32 new buses. And they ended up buying Mercedes-Benz, even though it was less than 0.5% cheaper. So instead of, this is a big contract, multi-million, $15 or $20 million contract. I mean, for less than the price of a set of tires, they decided to buy German and send the message to all of our NATO allies that if you want a good troop carrier, don't buy Canadian, buy German. That's what we do. So there's no buy Canadian component. So aren't we setting these companies up for failure to try and convince them to build guns and build arms here when there's no, we take the lowest bid at all costs? I mean, has that been thought through, that apparent contradiction?
So I really can't comment on this contribution to the military-industrial complex, but what I can speak to is kind of the rationale behind having a military component. So, Mr. Chair, when the report came out from Tom Jenkins on innovation, and given also our experience with the CICP program, there have been a number of components under the security component which were really military-type applications, and it was a military testing department. And one of the issues that comes up is that the value...
An example, Mr. Sabino, the type of applications you were getting that more fit into military than security?
Yeah, so one of them was a paint coating for that was more environmentally friendly. A company out of Montreal was an innovation, and they had their view that they could use that paint coating for aircraft, fighter aircraft. And so that was one example, and we can pull out some other examples. However, the idea being that military innovation, or that innovation had a military application. And so what the opportunity provides is for these small companies who really do not have not commercialized their products, are able to test their innovations and make a first sale, which is really kind of the main driver of this program, provide a first sale to the Canadian military, which would be is very useful for them as they develop their market. So that is one piece. The reason that the value of it is up to $1 million instead of $500,000 is most of the innovations that have a military application require quite a bit more development work to fit military specifications. And so
I would argue that health innovation is very expensive too and needs a lot of support. I guess what I'm getting at, without being critical, I'm just concerned the emphasis, 50% of the whole program is going into the new upstart section of the military, and the other four categories have to argue amongst themselves for what's left, and that includes the environment, health, and enabling technologies. I mean, these are important areas of research as well.
So the program, the value of the program is not diminished in any of those areas. It's the same program we had before. What the government has done is added to the approach up to an additional $20 million a year, which will be used to focus on military innovations.
Merci, merci, M. Martin. Temps est écoulé.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Your time is up. So, Mr. Trottier, also for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Sobrino and Mr. Gray. Mr. Sobrino, welcome back to the committee. It's good to see some progress in this program. We looked at the CICP 2 years ago, and there was some very positive feedback from some of the Canadian enterprises, some of them very small businesses that didn't even have cash flow, and yet they were talking about how this program was really effective. It gave them that springboard. It gave them that endorsement from the federal government to allow them to sell to other customers within Canada and even internationally. So there was truly some success. And, you know, I think we have a lot of programs to foster innovation. We all know that's the future for our economy. It's not based on competing necessarily on lowest price. It's being on innovative and being differentiated. You know, if you look at things like research grants and research chairs in universities and tax credits and the new venture capital fund. I mean, these end up adding up to billions of dollars, and so that yet this the business innovation or the Build in Canada Innovation Program is actually a very small program compared to those other ones. So could you talk about how, you know, how this is different than those other things? How is this different than, you know, putting money into venture capital or putting money into research grants?
Right. So this is a program that works at the pre-commercialization phase. So this is not a program to help a company access those kinds of funds. It is to take a company that is, when you divide the development of technology or development of innovation, it is kind of the final stages of that development. And so it really is one of the reasons that we've changed the name of the program is because that commercialization piece is not what the program does. It is a pre-commercialization piece. What the program is there to do is to take an innovation, so an invention that is now functioning, and seeing whether the government would be interested in testing it, and whether it's suitable for testing within government. The reason that we have that request from small medium enterprises that do this kind of work is that a government buy, as your first buy, is the best tool to get you to venture capital, commercialization, and investment by interested investors, as well as sales abroad. And many of these companies, what they're interested in is developing an export market. This is where they really want to push their innovations. Some of the works, of course, are things that can be delivered in Canada. Many are looking for export markets. So, for example, we have one company in back east who was working on a sensor for detecting oil droplets in water. And based on the work that they did with I believe it was Department of Fisheries and Oceans, the testing they did, and the successful use of the technology, and they adjusted the technology based on those tests, they were able to develop a market in the oil business in the Gulf of Mexico to help with detection of oil in the environment. So their business has increased, and they're actually out there now delivering. So what we're doing is providing a place, a venue, where you can actually sell your first product, test it, maybe improve on it, and make it more available and help you in terms of that sale helps you in terms of marketing your innovation abroad.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, you know, the whole process is different than traditional government procurement, where a department would identify certain needs, put together an RFP, go out to the market and get different bidders to compete, and then eventually get to a contract. Here we're looking at some products that actually exist, and the question being asked of the government: can you use this? Is there an application for this in your area of need? What kind of screens do you have in place to ensure that the government isn't buying things it doesn't actually need? You know, somebody might be enchanted by some new technology, new innovative technology, but not actually need it. So how do you ensure that?
So this is one of the issues that has been raised about the program, which is we're there to make that one sale to assist a company that has an innovative idea. Whether we actually end up wanting to buy it, that's a decision that the government will have to take. And the interesting piece is that once you have sold it and it now commercialized, you enter into the normal procurement world. You're not designated particularly. Certain rules might apply in the future, but generally that product's available in the market. What you're doing when you get that first, you do the testing department has to have some interest in the piece. And that's why they participate in developing that test to assess the equipment. The next thing that they have to do is decide whether they actually could use that application in the future. So, and this has happened a number of them, is that thank you very much. It's not something we will use in the future. We're glad to have tested it. So that is part of the process of introducing innovation. So you either can use it or you can't. We've had some surprising success in that some of those innovations have actually moved on to regular procurements for government. But in a lot of cases, that innovation is then marketed commercially as opposed to within government. So it's not that we're testing something useless. The program is about buying something and helping that innovator assess whether it's a useful thing. So it's very much in the R&D world and not in the commercial procurement world.
Yes.
If I could just add one comment. I think it's very instructive to look at some examples, and it's very interesting how this program has such a profound impact. And I can give you an example. We had a company that had offices in St. John's and Victoria, and they had a product which was called a marine training simulator that allows to do high-speed research rescue craft simulation, just like you would do for aircraft. Only this was for boats. And of course, the Canadian Coast Guard, Fisheries and Oceans were very interested in this because in and of itself, it's a very cost-effective way to test the functionality of these craft. What was very interesting is this company got into this program. They were pre-qualified into the program before we had actually, in fact, evaluated their product, before it even had come in. Because of the fact that other companies had heard the Canadian government was putting them into this program, in a sense was giving this opportunity, they actually had additional sales. They awarded 4 additional sales, 4 contracts internationally almost immediately. And what it is, this is the leveraging power of the confidence of the Government of Canada buying these products and services, and it's instructive not just to the businesses here, but also to companies to leverage this internationally. This was very effective.
Merci. Je vais devoir vous arrêter.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there. And now it's Ms. Day. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to take advantage of this opportunity to wish you happy holidays and to all the members of the public service who work very hard for us and for Canadians. I'm going to continue the questions that my colleague, who is the member, the critic for the NDP on this committee, he talked about the military component of this program, and you said that there was $20 million that was added to the military component, and you talked about 50%, so we're talking about $20 million for the military and $20 million for the regular component, so that's $40 million in total. As for the military component, obviously, the Canadian Forces can develop things that are also useful in daily life, for example, laser surgery. And I can also imagine that there are budgets that were assigned to the military side that were allocated for that, or perhaps they could have been transferred from another department. The request for the $20 million was presented in the budget, so that was something additional. It came from the budget of the Department of Finance, or the Minister of Finance's budget. This $20 million was an additional sum, and this program is not something, it's not a request that can be submitted by DND's research arm. It is for innovators in the private sector to be able to present innovations to the military sector. So it is not that the DND asked for this. Yes, but are you saying that this wasn't done before? No, it was not done in that way. The innovation of this program is that we push innovations towards the government, or that it pushes innovations towards the government. And as I explain in public meetings, is that it is a program, for example, I don't know that I would actually like to have this innovation. I don't realize it. It is the innovator who comes forward and explains it to me and says, listen, I have a good idea, and I would like to present it to you because it could help you, and to see whether it might suit you, or if if I can improve it. So it is kind of the opposite of what is usually done, because usually in the government we identify needs, and then with those needs, based on those needs, we go to calls for tender. But in this case, the call for tenders is, do you have ideas to give us new ideas? And the calls for tenders then come from Public Works. Yes, it is our program, and we look after procurement. And that is in addition to the military budget? No, it is an addition. We could transfer to the military component if they asked us to, but we are the ones who receive the money. So I often find there are goods, for example, of $150,000 on innovation that we bought. Can you tell me, well, there are 4 components besides the military component. How did you determine these sectors? That was a decision that was made in 2010 when we established the program to have a environmental component, health and safety, and enabling technologies. So that is, those are things that we decided when we established the program. What happened is that there was the study done by Tom Jenkins, and for example, in sectors where there are safety innovations, there is a great deal of demand for more leeway for military projects. So what we proposed is that we did not want to move that money that had already been set aside for the regular component. The idea was to add more money, and that is what Mr. Jenkins supported as well, that we should add more financial resources to facilitate this innovation in that sector, the military sector, but without taking away the money from the other sector. In the 2010 budget, the program was set up, and apparently there were gaps in the pre-commercialization of innovations. Is that still the case? Yes, that is still the case. It is really a problem that all small and medium-sized businesses must deal with in Canada. That is to make the transition from their innovation to the commercialization phase, and that step is always a problem, and that is why this program was set up. Thank you, Ms. Day. Your time is up. So we're going to go to Mr. Cannon for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks again to our witnesses. And like my colleague, Mr. Trache, was here for the report. And I'm just trying to clarify, first of all, the rationale for changing the name. And you mentioned something about commercialization. Maybe you could just clarify the thought process that went on with the name change.
So the name change is the original name, which is the Canadian Innovation Commercialization Program. What it did is that businesses that came to apply often asked us if the program helped them in marketing, in raising investment funds and things like that. There are other programs in government that do that kind of work, and it really is about commercializing. Our program really operates in the pre-commercialization phase, so between the invention and actually getting to that point. And so we realized that fairly early on in the program, so that was one of the main motivators to recommend that we change the name of the program to remove the word commercialization. And so it was settled. There are many versions that went forward, but Build in Canada Innovation is trying to describe what the program really is, which is innovations built in Canada that we access, or that they're able to access.
This is very similar to a program the United States has been using for several years, is it not?
Yeah, the Small Business Innovation Program that they have there. It's a different scale. They're a much bigger program, but yes, it's the same idea.
Same concept.
Same concept.
Because you mentioned in your opening comments, you referred to Mr. Jenkins as Tom Jenkins, who shared the Canada First Leveraging Defence Procurement Through Key Industrial Capabilities, his report in February of this year that was presented. And it's been alluded to, and I met with some of the manufacturers that are on the Hill today and yesterday, is Canada has been really good at universities at R&D, but we have taken that concept to commercialization. We have trouble. So when you are working with these innovators, which defense, I've got a company called ArmorWorks, Kelowna Flightcraft, Aviation, so they are not normally known. I mean, they're conservative in nature, which is nothing wrong with that by all means, but the fact when it comes to defense, they're not necessarily want to be the leading edge. So with this R&D program, is that helping sort of taking that edge out of the defense so they can help commercialize with the assistance of the federal government?
So that, yeah, well, that's precisely it. So the program, those companies, some of those have applied for our innovation program, and they are taking their invention or innovation, and through this program, getting government to buy it, to test it for them and improve it, and that takes them over the hump of actually having the from invention to actually having a commercially viable product. Well, and that's what we hope is the outcome. The other thing I might add for the members is that all these many of these R&D programs, we expect that innovations will have a fairly high failure rate. That it is the nature of innovation that you have to have you have to have amongst the successes there's some failures, and partly because of the interest that we have in this, and also the level of screening that we're doing with both the IRAP program evaluators from the National Research Council, as well as the private sector committee. We're having good success in terms of identifying winners, and we're too early to tell that is an ongoing thing, but we're seeing very good results out of the program that way.
Right. I'd just like to add one thing. It's the examples we're seeing, also the real-world examples, and I like to use them because I think they're very instructive of how these things actually do take place. And referring to the earlier question about D&D, we had a company that brought forward an innovation. It was a company called 2G Robotics, and their innovation was the ULS 100, which essentially is an underwater laser scanner. And so this was brought in, the D&D sponsored it through the Defence Research and Development Canada. And it was very interesting. They brought this product in. It actually initially didn't perform according to the specifications. So the process is, of course, we don't just fail it. We go back and work with them. They come back and they come back again. They tweak their product, because that's what this kind of thing does. It allows you to refine the product, bring it back, and make it work. And that's the goal. What was very interesting in this case, during this process, they did bring it forward, and this product was brought over for the Costa Concordia, which, as you know, floundered in Italy, off the coast of Italy, and has been used as the product to scan, to help with this salvage and the retrieval of this ship, because it was this technology that was regarded as one of the leading edge for this work. So out of these activities, it may be directed in one area, but it gets picked up in other areas. And even the process of engaging these companies not only gives them recognition, but it also enables them to improve their product.
Merci.
Great success story. Thank you very much.
Monsieur Cannon. Donc, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. So 5 minutes as well for Mr. Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for appearing before us. I can't help but think there's a certain element of déjà vu, though, in the notion of this program. Canada, the government of Canada has had an unsolicited proposals program for decades, hasn't it?
We don't do unsolicited proposals anymore. With the introduction of the trade agreements, that we don't have that process anymore.
I can actually add to that, because I used to work in that program, because I'm that old. So I mean, this goes back to, yeah, exactly. This goes back to the 1980s and the early 1990s. And at that time, we did have a UPP, an unsolicited proposals program, with a fund. And that was intended in some ways to do some of this thing, but it also focused on certain technologies. but it didn't have exactly the same structure, nor did it have the push component in the same way that it does now. This is a much more open, transparent, and I think it provides a more competitive process in the end for this process. Every company who comes into this process, there's a bid notification, a tender notification. They bring their things forward, they're competing, and there's a competitive process where they're evaluated against the core criteria. So the UPP didn't have that kind of structure to it. This program does, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's delivering such, I believe, good value.
Okay, well, that's helpful. Thanks for that. Just to sort of circle that square, or square that circle. This is still based on an unsolicited. An entrepreneur comes forward with an idea and presents the idea. So there's
but it is solicited, in the sense that the government is saying, bring us your innovative products.
So we have so let me just go through the processes. We sent out a request for proposal or call for proposals, and we've just sent one out last week, and we're soliciting that please bring forward your innovations. They must be 80% Canadian. They must you must not be in a commercial. You must be in a pre-commercial stage in terms of the proposal, and there's one other element which escapes me right now, but there's, it has to be less than $500,000 or $1 million for the military side.
Okay, I understand that, but it sounds like you're really trying to position this as being a solicited proposal, but in fact, and I'm not trying to be critical here, but I'm just trying to get to understand this a little bit better. It's still very open-ended, with the exception of you actually have a call for proposals. You have not pre-identified which companies should bid. So it does seem to me that it bears the mark of an unsolicited proposal format.
It's very much, in that sense, I would say, yes, we have some restrictions on it, which is part of the initial call. And then the screening we go through, like they have to be, like the IRAP panel is looking to see whether the company's has the business plan in place, whether their technology is in the right area of development, those kinds of things. And then finally that third look, which is that private sector academic review, which is to see whether these companies really have what it takes to go through. So at the end of the day, you end up with a pre-qualified list of ideas, innovations, inventions, that are then available for departments to access and test. So in a sense, it does kind of, for these businesses, what's interesting in the businesses is that by participating in this procurement process, they are understanding how to put together a document.
Okay, I understand that. I appreciate that. But there's another benefit in the sense that if the Canadian Coast Guard is presented with a particular business concept, innovation, there's an advantage to the Canadian Coast Guard to participate in this because the money actually does not come from the Coast Guard's A base. Is that correct? It's Public Works Government Services money, which actually raises an interesting question. If the product was good, that if it was valuable to the Canadian Coast Guard, why couldn't the entrepreneur simply go to the Coast Guard and convince them that this is really what you need to buy because it's innovative and it will save you money? In actual fact, two things, and I'll just, because I think I'm probably running out of time, but two things that seems to strike me about this is that it's easier for the government to for government departments to participate in this because it does not come out of their A base, which does raise a question of legitimacy. But the second thing is does the existence of this program identify a gap in procurement within the Government of Canada in the sense that if it was easy for a small startup entrepreneurial company to do business with the Canadian Coast Guard or the Canadian International Development Agency or whatever they're called, or whomever, why can't they do it? Why do they need to do it through this program?
So the fundamental piece of this program comes in the innovation side. So they have a product that the Coast Guard doesn't know it might need. So that's really kind of the difference. So the Coast Guard has all its requirements and it has to choose from a bunch of priorities within its budget, et cetera. But this program here is really about somebody coming up to us with an innovative idea. We screen for that idea, regardless of what idea it is, and against the basic categories, I say. And let's say it's some new rubber for inflatable boats, let's say. So they come in with that. And we sit there and go, okay, this is an interesting piece of rubber that you can do something with. And then what we will do as Public Works is says, okay, we're interested in actually procuring to test this, but we need a department to test it for or with. And so that department might be the Coast Guard, it might be Defense, depending on what we find. And so we will go to that department and say, does this interest you? Do you think that it's worth testing this? And by the way, we're buying it for you to test. And so they will test it. Now, the question is, will they buy it in the future? Like, let's say they're happy with the product. Well, then now they know of its existence, plus they've tested it, so they have some sense of its success. And so then they're able to put it into their normal procurement process.
Merci. Je vais devoir vous arrêter tout de suite pour céder la parole.
Thank you. I'm going to have to stop you there and turn the floor over to Ms. Oblonsky for 5 minutes.
Hey, well, thank you very much. This is an exciting program. And, you know, there was concern, as you know, for a number of years that the same big companies kept getting government procurement and the little guys were squeezed out. And so they never had a chance to become big guys because nobody gave their product a chance. And of course, the government stamp of approval goes a long way in the market. But for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction, as the saying goes. And so the other thing we've seen in some countries that are very dedicated to internal procurement practices is that the cost is high. Inefficiencies can be high because sometimes companies know that they have you over a barrel in the sense that you've got to buy Canadian. You know, you've seen a recent procurement where the delays keep going on and on and on. The deliveries never happen. And you know, some very important needs are unmet because of that. So my question is, how do you see the government and this process keeping the right balance?
So it is very much about looking at procurements in this pre-commercial, or innovations in this pre-commercialization phase. So part of the reason that we can keep it in Canada is because it is a research and development program. So within the trade agreements, et cetera, you have exclusions for R&D. And so that's part of the reason why we can have this program. So it ensures that Canadian companies have this opportunity at that level. The other piece that essentially keeps out the bigger players is that they are relatively small contracts. They're small amounts of money. And although we cannot exclude a large industry to participate in the program, large Canadian industry participate in the program, it really is the small companies that are able to produce a product that's at a price that fits within the boundaries of the program. So the larger companies often fall within the value of whatever innovation they bring. They have a lot of overhead attached to it, which ends up costing quite a bit more. And so these small innovators are much more nimble at providing a new product. So that kind of is the incentive to keep the program. So we want to keep the program small. The reason that the military component is up to $1 million is just the fact that even small innovations for the military tend to cost more to develop. But we've found that this $500,000, because we had the opportunity to recommend to the government to increase the amount, and we find that $500,000, we got lots of innovations, and they're all in that kind of value range that I think some are as low as in the $40,000, $50,000 range, and some up to $250,000, $400,000. So that is how I think we keep the program small, lets it be nimble, allows the small, medium enterprises to really participate in the program.
Thank you for that. As you know, Industry Canada has responsibility for the small business file. Does a lot of work to support and encourage small business. Can you tell us about the interface between your department and Industry Canada and their work with small businesses in Canada?
We don't have a lot of interface. Again, this program here is a procurement program, and so falls firmly within our mandate. We do a lot of work between the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises and the Small Business Program at Industry Canada. For us, what we do at Public Works with small businesses is very much helping small and medium-sized enterprises access the procurement system. And so that is trying to demystify how to do procurement with government, and this program is one way of doing that. But our Office of Small and Medium Enterprises does a lot of that. We work with Industry Canada on things like business registration. We work with Industry Canada just on identifying which of the small businesses, et cetera. But they have a lot of other developmental programs for small, medium enterprises that fall outside our mandate.
Yeah, I know that's true, but I think, Mr. Chairman, I'd recommend that this committee look a little bit more at the merits of better interface. I think we all know that sometimes government operates, as the saying goes, in silos, and so we don't really leverage each other's expertise and programs the way we could. Mr. Gray?
I just wanted to say that we are working with the OSME because of the OSME activity, that we are working with Industry Canada, and we do an awful lot of outreach, as you can imagine, for the OSME program right across Canada. We attend many different events, support business to communicate the advantage of this program, and a part of that process is we also interface with our colleagues in Industry Canada. So we share an awful lot of information as they do with us.
Merci, merci de t'interpeller.
Thank you. Your time has elapsed. So we'll go to Ms. Day for 5 minutes. I would like to ask a number of questions. I have an article that says that Canada lags behind in innovation, and it says that innovation remains the poor cousin, and it got a D rating, the worst possible, out of the 22 indicators used by the Conference Board. So I thought that we were at the leading edge of innovation, but so I'm making a link between innovation and economic development. I don't know if you see a link, but I certainly see a direct one. So if we are laggards in terms of innovation, is economic development in danger? Well, I haven't heard about that report. We have a very small part to contribute through this program to the specific development of small and medium-sized businesses that have innovations to put forward. But the major innovation programs, it is more Industry Canada that looks after those programs. But all I do is I look after supply, and it is really a program that is a very small part of the government efforts. And with regard to small business people, is it the community development futures development programs that look after that? Yes, a large part of that is the regional economic development offices. For example, there's one in Quebec, in the West, FedNor in Ontario. So those are the offices that are responsible for this. And I think that they report to industry. Can you tell me how many projects have been funded over the past year under the Build in Canada program?
How many programs have we funded last year?
While you're looking for the answer, could you also tell me if that is in certain regions, or can all regions of Canada benefit from this program? No, it's not limited. It's a cross-Canada program, and we do a great deal of outreach in urban centres and also in smaller and more remote communities of Canada. And I think that last month we made a presentation in Alberta at a symposium in Banff concerning innovation for small and medium-sized businesses. And last year, the value of the contracts that were issued, there were 67 projects over the 3 years to the tune of $24 million. And I could submit to the committee a summary of these programs over the years. Was the pilot project evaluated? The pilot project did undergo a formative evaluation. So that was a first evaluation. And the findings of this evaluation will be posted on the Public Works website in the coming weeks. But apparently this program does support the government's mandates and priorities. and it appears to be an efficient program. We will have to do another evaluation in 2 years' time to confirm the results of the program, because what we're doing now is we're doing follow-up with the companies that did receive contracts in order to see what the results were of the procurement and to see whether this has increased their sales figures. When you evaluate the proposals that are presented to you by the innovators, is there an evaluation team? Or rather, there is an innovation selection committee, and apparently this is from the private sector. So do they come entirely from the private sector? Who appoints them? And are there women on that committee? We identify the committee. We have the members on the committee, and what we have now is that there are 3 people from the government, from the Public Works Department, who sit on the committee. There are 8 members of the committee who come from the private sector, and we also have on the committee university representatives. So they're entrepreneurs in residence, so they're professors at the University of Waterloo, Ottawa, Manitoba, the École de Technologie Supérieure in Quebec, so that we have representatives from universities across the country. So one of the things, before the committee was entirely formed of the private sector, and now it is divided between academia, the private sector, and government representatives as well. So thank you. I believe that you're going to post it on the site, so people will be able to consult it. We'll go to Mr. Van Kesteren. Oh, Mr. Komarnicki then? Mr. Komarnicki? All right.
A couple of questions. Number one, this program is sort of a point of entry into the federal government and a calling card for potential contracts with third parties. Have you done any analysis in terms of how successful the program has been to having access to third parties by individual people that have gone through the program, either by number of people they've been able to employ or by income that they have generated after they're out of the program? I guess because the success would depend on that, and that's sort of the essence of the program.
So that's exactly, the evidence is starting to show, but we have to go through the evaluation process. But I would say anecdotally at this point, that there are a number of companies who have gone from an innovation, have successfully tested it with us, and have gone on to sales and exports abroad, which is the biggest driver of helps us in terms of driving growth, and those companies are starting to be successful. Now, part of our evaluation is to be going out to those companies at 1 year and I believe 3 years to see what happened. So
you haven't done that analysis?
We're not far enough into the program to do it.
Numbers of people, but do you have any sense at all?
We're seeing growth. Like we're seeing these companies are now hiring people and manufacturing and scaling up their products.
Just maybe following up on Mr. Burns' question, and probably from a different angle, but so the essence of your program is that you have small and medium-sized businesses who have a product that they can't yet take to third parties because they haven't gone through the testing and I guess viability, if you want to call it that. And so would it be then that it is difficult for small and medium-sized businesses to have the facility and perhaps the cash flow and the capital to do what government already can do through various departments? So is that the essence of what your program is about?
So the essence of the program is fundamentally to give, the most important thing about the program is the first sale, because that is the thing that helps you most in marketing, is that you actually sold to your government. So many entrepreneurs, when they go abroad, the very first question that a government or a large company will ask them, has your government ever bought any of these? And if you can say yes, they bought one, then you've got a foot in the door. So that's one of the first things we do. The second thing that is making sure that their product's actually a viable product. And so that is the piece that they need to go to get venture capital and other forms of investment to actually be able to scale up their products.
But the point is that they don't have to incur the cost of going through that process because you provide it to them if they're successful.
That's right. But one of the gaps and this is the gap we're trying to fill, is that first buy to government is the most difficult thing to do. And that's what this is doing, is facilitate that first buy. And
Go ahead.
It's called a reference buy. So you're able to refer to the fact that the government has bought this product. And around the world, that's what's expected first.
So now, when I was listening to you, you were saying that people that have existing product or existing inventions that they don't know what to do with yet, or hope they can find something to do with, are the type that would come through to your program through a proposal and use the benefits of your facility. Does the program actually get people to invent with the view of targeting the program through products that haven't yet existed?
No, that's the program is really about taking your invention and seeing whether there is A, you're ready to do it, and B, whether the government can test it for you.
So that you haven't seen people saying, look, now you've got the program, let's
do some inventions
so we can use the facility and the resources you have to sort of augment our business, because it doesn't cost us to do that.
Yeah, so I suspect that is probably happening. I mean, that should, as the program gets better known, people who have ideas may pursue ideas to be able to participate in the program. But you do have to take your product, like you have to do quite a bit of work to get to what's readiness level 7. I mean, you have to invest, you have to invent, you have to have the your proof of concept has to be done. You actually have to have a product ready to go, etc.
So just one quick question, I'll finish. What is the value of going through the process in real dollars if I had to do it on my own as opposed to going through the facility of your program?
The real value is that in a lot of cases, if you don't get the reference buy, you stopped. It's not whether you can put money into it, it's you stopped. So what you'd have to convince is, you probably have to convince, and I'm speculating here, but you'd have to convince a larger company to take your product and take it away. So it's a different, it's a completely different idea.
Merci pour vos questions, vos réponses.
Thank you for the questions and answers. I also have a very rapid question before we wrap. You referred to the fact that you promote the program in certain conferences and symposiums. So how much resources do you allocate to promoting the program, for example, so that businesses in my riding could know that this program exists? How much do you promote this program? Well, I now use the staff that I have in the regions in for example, for the Office of Small and Medium Enterprises, we're trying to expand that team, actually. And what I have now, and we also use staff from other departments. For example, D&D staff often accompanies to the regions. For example, New Brunswick is an example. The Office of Small and Medium Enterprises is in Halifax, and there are people from D&D who attend these meetings, and therefore we can show all these innovators what their opportunities are to do business with us. So this is an outreach program, and we do that across Canada in small towns as well as in larger urban centers. We have a lot more success in smaller communities where we can attract attention. In larger cities, it's harder to do that, but that's what we do. There aren't a lot of resources on the ground. It is really our people who work directly with the small and medium-sized businesses, so that they have specialized sessions to promote this program. Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank you for for appearing today before the committee. So I'm going to suspend for a few minutes, and we'll bring in our next panel. Thank you very much for your presence today, and good luck with the follow-up to this program. Thank you, and happy holidays to everyone.
Alors, à l'ordre, order. Comité à l'ordre.
I'd like to call this committee to order. We are going to continue our meeting number 9, but this time we'll be welcoming witnesses from the Public Service Commission of Canada. More specifically, Ms. Anne-Marie Robinson, who is the President, and Ms. Laurando, who is the Senior Vice President, Policy Branch. And accompanying them, we have Ms. Bogdan, who is the Vice President, Audit and Data Services Branch, and Jerry Tom, who is the Vice President, Staffing and Assessment Services. So they are with us today to talk about their annual 2012-2013 report. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the floor over to you for about 10 minutes, and then the committee members will put questions to you. And so I would like to thank you for appearing before us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very pleased to be here today to discuss, on behalf of myself and my fellow commissioners Susan Cartwright and Danielle Tucker, the Public Service Commission's 2012-13 annual report, which was tabled in Parliament on November the 6th. The mandate of the Public Service Commission is to promote and safeguard merit-based appointments and in collaboration with other stakeholders to protect the nonpartisan nature of the public service. We welcome this opportunity to report to Parliament on our mandate. Today, I will be focusing my remarks on 3 areas. I will discuss the results of our oversight activities, make observations on the hiring and staffing activities in the public service, and highlight some areas where I think there is still more work to do. Monsieur le Président, la surveillance...
Mr. Speaker, oversight of the staffing system is a priority for the Public Service Commission. Based on all our oversight and feedback mechanisms, which includes monitoring, audits, and investigations, the Commission has concluded that the management of staffing in departments and agencies continued to improve in 2012-2013.
Cette année, la...
The 12 audits the PSC conducted this year found that most of the key elements of effective staffing management were in place. Also, we determined that deputy heads and managers respected their delegated authority. However, some areas still require further attention. For example, some organizations need to continue to improve their internal monitoring of appointment processes, because this allows them to detect and correct issues in a timely way. This brings me to our investigations. This year, 44 cases were founded. We saw more cases involving fraud, for instance, the use of false educational or professional credentials. Many of these cases were detected as a result of improved monitoring by departments and agencies, as well as by the Public Service Commission. However, I would like to note that the number of problematic transactions and founded investigations is actually very low in the context of the more than 100,000 hiring and staffing activities conducted on average each year.
This was an unusual year in many ways, as departments and agencies focused their efforts on redeploying employees and placing persons affected by workforce adjustment, thereby altering the normal staffing patterns in government. Overall, hiring to the public service declined by 28.3%. This includes indeterminate, specified term, and casual hiring, as well as the hiring of students. With fewer hires and more departures, the overall population that is covered by the Public Service Employment Act declined by 5.4%. Public service hiring declined throughout the country, but more particularly in the National Capital Region. While student hiring was also down, over 9,500 students were still hired for part-time and summer employment. They represented 31% of all hiring to the public service, a percentage that has consistently increased over the past 4 years. We also saw enhanced access to public service jobs. National Area of Selection continues to allow more Canadians to apply for opportunities no matter where they live. As well, Canadians without any previous work experience in the public service accounted for 41.7% of new permanent hires, the largest component for the first time in over a decade. Now I'd like to turn to the support that the PSC provided to organizations in managing workforce reductions. In 2012-13, the PSC enhanced the Priority Administration Program, which allows the public service to retain qualified employees who have the skills and experience needed for the future. Working in close collaboration with departments and agencies, the PSC placed 956 priority persons, 17% more than last year, even though permanent hiring was down by some 60%. Since April 1st, I'm also very happy to say that we have successfully redeployed another 953 priority persons, the vast majority of which were surplus employees. At the same time, the PSC has seen a drop in the placement in other priority categories, including a significant decline in the placement of Canadian Armed Forces veterans who have been medically released. At the request of Veterans Affairs, the Public Service Commission provided technical options to address this issue for their consideration, and the government has recently introduced Bill C-11, an act to amend the Public Service Employment Act with respect to priority hiring for medically released veterans. Should Parliament approve these proposed amendments, the PSC is ready to implement them. I'd now like to turn to public service renewal. There were fewer graduates who entered the public service in 12-13. There were also fewer employees aged 35 years of age and younger. They represented 18.4% of the public service in March 2013, down from 21.4% in March 2010. In this context, a focus on renewal and the recruitment of new employees will gain greater importance as the public service moves forward. Future recruitment must also take into account our increasingly diverse population. According to the most recent population data published by Treasury Board, overall we are making progress with respect to the representation of employment equity in the public service. However, we still have work to do. This year, the PSC conducted further research to better understand the challenges that employment equity groups experience and to use the findings to better target areas for specific action. For instance, we looked more closely at how being a member of an employment equity group affects the chances of promotion. One of the notable findings was that both men and women with disabilities were less likely to be promoted when compared to those not belonging to an employment equity group. Even though these findings represent a single snapshot over a period of 1 year, we are concerned, and we are now undertaking more detailed work using this year's data. As part of this, we're taking a deeper look at career progression amongst the designated groups. In the meantime, we are sharing these findings with those in the public service who have leadership responsibilities for employment equity, including deputy ministers and heads of human resources. We've also shared these results with the champions and the chairs of the respective employment equity groups in government.
With respect to innovation, the Public Service Commission continues to leverage its technology and expertise to offer departments and agencies efficient and cost-effective services tailored to their needs. This year, the Commission expanded its e-testing capacity. We have seen a steady increase in online testing, which now represents 50% of all tests administered by the Public Service Commission. We also made further advances in the use of unsupervised Internet testing and computer-generated testing. These innovative tools are a valuable link in enhancing access to public service jobs and effectively managing high volumes of applicants. I would now like to turn to the issue of nonpartisanship. Safeguarding the political impartiality of the public service continues to be of critical importance. Our 2012 staffing survey found that employees' awareness continued to increase. 73% of respondents were aware of their rights and responsibilities with respect to political activities, up from 69% found in last year's survey. We will continue to collaborate with departments, agencies, and other stakeholders to find ways of sustaining this momentum.
Years since the implementation of the Public Service Employment Act, and we are reflecting on how we can continue to evolve our risk-based approach to audits, for example, with respect to small and micro organizations. Going forward, the Public Service Commission is committed to working collaboratively with departments and agencies to build a strong culture and foundation of compliance while providing independent oversight and assurance to Parliament on the health of the staffing system and the nonpartisan nature of the public service. Finally, Mr. Chair, you may have noticed that the PSC itself was among the 12 organizations audited in 2012-13. The Commission put in place robust measures to mitigate risks concerning possible conflicts of interest, and the findings and the 3 recommendations in this audit are being addressed through the implementation of a detailed action plan. I would now be very pleased to respond to your questions.
Merci infiniment pour votre présentation.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So without further ado, I will allow the members of the committee to ask questions, beginning with Ms. Day, 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would also like to wish all of you happy holidays with your family. And thank you for having agreed to come before us. My first question is going to concern veterans and members of the forces. We know that there is a major risk and that there's been a rise in the number of suicides among serving men and women. We're talking about 26.6% among men. And if the women's rate is 14% higher than the general public, and with regard to the files here, we know that you manage different priorities. For example, people with disabilities, you have to manage workforce adjustment, returning after extended leave, moving with spouses who are part of the Canadian Forces. So can you tell us whether you have special measures in place for veterans in order to allow them to return to the labor market quickly? Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for that question. I can say at the outset that veterans who are medically discharged have priority within our system. And with that priority status, the Public Service Commission can refer veterans to positions that are available. But under the existing law, there are other criteria. For example, there are certain priorities that are statutory priorities, and they take precedence over other categories of priorities. Now, according to the law, medically discharged veterans of the forces are regulatory priorities. So for that reason, the Commission is happy to see that the recently tabled bill gives veterans a higher level of priority, and that can help us to ensure that we can put more medically discharged veterans in these free positions that are available. Now, are veterans more in indeterminate positions? With regard to the priority program, people who are appointed using this flexibility are staffed in permanent positions. We saw in the 2012-2013 report that for the first time in a decade, people with no former experience were the largest number of people who were staffed to indeterminate positions. Can you explain that to us? Can you explain why? Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that question. It is difficult to say because 2012-2013 was a year that was out of the ordinary. But I think that our staffing processes are more open now, and so we can see that people who have no experience in can have a chance in our competitions. We know that 2012-2013 was also, there were also a number of people, public servants who were dismissed. So were there any measures that were put in place to fill surplus positions, for example? Thank you very much for that question. The policy in general for workforce adjustment is the responsibility of the Treasury Board Secretariat, but there are two key roles for our commission. We are responsible for the policy of determining how public servants will be kept in their position or made available. So that is to ensure that the process is transparent and fair. And also the Commission is responsible for managing the priority administration program. And public servants who were declared surplus have the right to be part of this priority system. That is the responsibility of the Commission, to ensure that people who were declared surplus are appointed to a position before any other public servants. So in 2012-2013, we staffed some 950 positions, and we have also appointed another 950 since April 2013. Is my time up? No, you have 5 seconds left. Well, thank you very much then. Merry Christmas.
Monsieur Van Kesteren pour 5 minutes.
We're going to go to Mr. Van Kesteren for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for appearing before us. Ms. Robinson, in your presentation, page 1, you, and I quote, "This year 44 cases were founded. We saw that more cases." What's that mean? 44 cases were founded. Did you fire 44 people?
Thank you for the question. Under our mandate for conducting investigations under the Act, there's a number of categories under which we do those investigations. We can do investigations if there's been an error made in a competitive process, if there's been improper conduct. And in this case, as I mentioned, I talked about the number of fraud cases. After a finding, as a result of any one of those investigations, there's a number of different corrective measures that could be put in place, including revocation of a position. So
I guess I wanted to know, I'm sorry, I have to just interject if you wouldn't mind. I want to know, were those 44 fired, though, or were they just corrected? Out of the, what are there, 220, how many public servants?
Yeah, there's last year, well, normally we have about 100,000 transactions per year, and the number of founded investigations in that context are relatively small. But of course, we take all of these cases very seriously. So, for example, in a fraud case where someone has presented false credentials, normally what would happen in that case is the appointment would be revoked and the person would no longer work for the public service. Those are quite rare. In other cases, depending on what has happened in the context of the investigation, different corrective measures are put in place. And in fact, in our annual report, we do have a detailed table with all of the different corrective measures by numbers following the investigations.
Okay, but I'm not getting an answer, and maybe I just don't grab it. Maybe you could just be a little clear. I guess your job is to monitor the public employees. And in so doing, there are going to be cases where you have to take final action. You have to fire. And I'm just curious, and how many public servants are there, did you say?
Under the Public Service Employment Act, there's 200,000 public servants.
So last year, how many of them would have been, the corrective measure would have been like, sorry, you're terminated?
In 2012-13, the Commission revoked 9 appointments, which means those people, that's the term used under the law, those appointments were revoked, and so those persons no longer had employment in those cases in the public service.
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah.
So out of 200,000 employees, you've only had 4 that you had to or 9 that you had to dismiss.
I should clarify that the jurisdiction of the Commission only relates, these are investigations that relate to the question of fraud vis-a-vis an appointment process. So there may have been other public servants for different reasons who had been let go from the public service.
But that doesn't fall under the Commission.
That's correct, yes. So 9 is just those to do with revocations of appointments where the appointment process itself was somehow flawed.
Okay, good. I'm glad you clarified that because I found that extremely puzzling. I thought that's either you've really got a really great workforce or I don't know what the other I want to go to your statement on your nonpartisan public service. What do you mean by that? Are you saying that in the workplace they are not to display any leanings on one party towards another? Is it just a training that our public servants have so that, can you maybe elaborate on that?
Sure. The Public Service Commission's role vis-a-vis nonpartisanship, the primary way we ensure a nonpartisan public service is to ensure the appointment itself is based on merit and free from political influence. So that's a big part of what we do. We are also responsible for regulating political activities of public servants. And there's 2 main categories. There's ones where if a public servant, for example, wants to be a candidate in an election, we have a regime in place where that public servant must come to the Commission and ask for permission. And depending on the nature of the election and the nature of their duties, they would normally take a leave of absence, and then in a federal election, if elected, they would resign from their positions. And then in municipal elections, depending on their position and the nature of those duties, they may or may not take a leave of absence. We also provide guidance to public servants. Public servants under the Public Servant Employment Act do have a right to engage in political activities, provided that it doesn't impair their ability to conduct their job in a politically impartial manner. So, for example, if you're a very senior public servant, that would be extremely restricted what a public servant could do, but there's many public servants, for example, in administrative jobs, where they do have rights and they may well be able to engage in political activities because they may be in jobs where they don't have highly visible positions and the natures of their duties are such that wouldn't put the impartiality of the public servant at risk. Having said that, while at work and while carrying out their functions, all public servants must conduct their duties in a politically impartial manner.
Merci. Je vais devoir vous arrêter ici.
Thank you, Mr. Van Kesteren. We'll have to stop here, and we'll turn it over to Mr. Martin for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and welcome, Ms. Robinson. It's a pleasure to see you again and your associates. I have been following and tracking the Public Service Commission for quite a few years now, and I welcome your annual report. It's very helpful for us to see trends and patterns and some themes, some problems that simply don't go away. I can point to as well. You've prefaced your remarks under hiring and staffing this year with the phrase that this was an unusual year in many ways, in that many were focusing on the redeployment. I see that as a diplomatic way of saying that there was pandemonium in the public service with all of the cutting and hacking and slashing that went on, and the problems that this creates in terms of redeploying people who are declared surplus but who have a right to be reemployed elsewhere. My question is, in the second paragraph, you say that with all of this redeployment going on, the actual overall population covered by the Act declined by 5.4%. Can you tell me how many bodies that means? How many persons' jobs is 5.4% less than the previous year?
Thank you for the question. The population declined from around 211,000 to in the range of 200,000. Those are approximate numbers.
11,000.
I can ask one of my colleagues.
That's plenty close
Yeah,
enough for
so it's
our
in the range of
purposes.
10,000. Now, that would be under the Public Service Employment Act.
Yes.
There are departments that are not under our act.
So just doing the quick math, let's say a total cost of $100,000 per employee with salary and benefits, etc. That'd be $1.1 billion cut from the public payroll. $100,000 times 11,000 people, I think I've counted up the zeros, $1.1 billion savings for all this cutting and hacking and slashing that's gone on. So, but on the other side of the coin, one of the recurring themes that you and your predecessor, Madame Barados, have always brought to our attention is the overwhelming proliferation of contracting out and hiring temporary services because of the problem you identified that it takes 5.5 months just to hire somebody. It took 4.5 months in 2011, 5.5 months in 2012. So government departments who are left short by cutbacks end up going to temporary help services. So can you tell me how much money the government is spending per year then? Well, it's $459 million on managerial consulting. How much on temporary staff? Can you help me with that figure?
Thank you for the question. The Commission does not have that information. Temporary help and contracting of agencies is under the responsibility, I believe it's Public Works shared with Treasury Board policy. The Commission does monitor the use of casual workers, but not particularly temporary help, because it's not under our jurisdiction.
So you can't help us connect those dots. I thought it was one of the things that Madame Barados raised with us a number of times, the use of the Kelly secretarial services, these businesses that are popping up all over Parliament Hill to provide temporary, low-paid services to do the work that was once done by a well-paid public servant with benefits. This is not something that you track. Is it not something that you should be concerned about as a Public Service Commission?
The Public Service Commission works with departments to ensure there's overall planning in place, and I know that my predecessor, Madame Barados, did do a special study on temporary help, and she was particularly looking at it in terms of the inflow into permanent jobs. And so we do monitor the transition from casual worker into permanent jobs to ensure that the merit process is being respected, but that would be the jurisdiction and the perspective from the Commission.
Merci, le temps est écoulé.
Thank you. Your time has elapsed. So that's it for your time. Mr. O'Connor, 5 minutes.
Yeah, before I get to my actual questions, in reaction to my colleagues' points, I want to point out that between 06 and 12, we increased the public service about 36,000 jobs. And that, as you record, there might be 11,000 less jobs here now than there was before, but a number of those were empty. They weren't filled. And there's a number of people who retire also, so we're not talking, I'm not going to ask you the question, we're not asking to cut 11,000 people. We didn't cut 11,000 people. My question has to do with basically language. What's the proportion of Anglophones versus Francophones in the overall public service? Just a rough cut.
Based on the Treasury Board data from 11-12, 68.2% of the core public administration, which is slightly beyond the Public Service Employment Act population, is Anglophone, and 31.8% is Francophone.
And that's the overall public service?
That's the overall public service.
Okay. So my next question is, what's the proportion in the National Capital Region?
I don't have that breakdown, but Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to send that information to the committee.
I suspect it's a higher number, but anyway. Now, in your organization, do you hire people from the outside? Is that your job, or do you actually deal with people moving between jobs inside the public service?
Thank you for the question. The overall responsibility for the Public Service Commission is actually to set appointment policy to ensure that appointments themselves are based on merit and free from political influence. The actual day-to-day staffing is delegated to deputy ministers and largely done by government departments, except for a few things like we run my colleague here, Jerry Tom, still runs the student recruitment programs and a number of programs for students, co-op students, summer employment. The Commission is the one who manages those processes, but the appointments themselves are done by individual departments, and they all do their own human resources planning.
I've heard allegations in the past that inside the public service, and as you're saying, the hiring is being done by deputy ministers or their agents, that there is cronyism, favoritism, etc. within the public service. Is that your experience or not?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. In general, it is the Commission's responsibility to oversee the integrity of the appointments in the public service, and so we have a robust system of oversight which includes regular reporting. We have a robust audit function, and every year we conduct in the range of 12 audits, and we continually use a risk-based approach, so we can intervene in departments if we see problems. And I spoke earlier about our investigation function, and so if a problematic transaction comes to light, we have the authority to investigate those transactions and can take corrective measures up to and including revocation. In general, we see those things as being relatively rare. Since the authority was delegated to departments in 2005, we have been working closely with departments to gradually improve their management of the system and really encouraging them to have robust monitoring in place, because in a delegated model in such a large, complex environment, what we really want to see is departments themselves detecting and correcting problematic transactions in real time.
Do I still have time?
Yes,
Yep.
45 seconds.
Oh, 45 seconds. What are the, I think this is in your domain, what is the criteria that the public service uses to hire people? Do they proportion out men and women, Anglo, Franco, minorities, whatever?
Our appointments are based on merit and based on the qualifications for the job. So when it comes to bilingualism, certain jobs are designated, and this is done under Treasury Board policy, bilingual or non-bilingual, and so there's a whole policy behind that determination. In terms of employment equity, there are some provisions under the Act, for example, to designate certain competitions or limit the area of selection to certain employment equity groups. However, I would say that over the past 5 years, that's been used on average in less than 3% of appointment processes. So in 97% of appointment processes or more, those provisions are not used in terms of restricting areas of selection.
Merci pour vos questions, vos réponses.
Thank you for your questions and for the answers. Mr. Byrne?
To our witnesses, I'd like to ask about the relative contribution or inclusion of whistleblowers in your investigative process. Is there a substantial? Would you be able to describe to the committee the volume of independent participants who may raise a concern from within the public service, people we would generally call as whistleblowers, very courageous people, and do you sense there's any constraint to their participation?
Thank you for the question. I would say in general our investigations, trying to think of the number, but we have some 500. I'll correct that for the record if I'm incorrect about that, but I believe it's in the range of 500 complaints or cases are brought to our investigations branch on average every year. They're reviewed by our jurisdictions directorate, and then we have to determine whether we both have jurisdiction and grounds to launch an investigation. They come to us in a number of ways. Sometimes departmental monitoring will bring them forward. Sometimes it's the Commission's audits that will uncover cases, and then we have individuals as well who bring cases forward to the Commission. The Commission is always open to anyone who wants to bring forward a complaint or a concern. We are an independent organization, and we, using a legal test, review those concerns independently and then make a determination as to whether or not it would be appropriate to launch an investigation.
Thank you very much for that. You've mentioned to this to your in your testimony to the committee jurisdictional issues, whether or not the Commission has the jurisdiction to be able to conduct an investigation. Have you been frustrated or thwarted in terms in some of your investigations because you lack the jurisdiction to enter a particular field, or is that a concern of yours or not?
It is not generally a concern. There's nothing that's come to my attention since I've been in this office. We do, for example, have subpoena powers and other powers that we can use. So we have quite a robust set of powers that allow us to interview who we need to interview within, the normal legal constraints of using those powers.
One of the points of vulnerability in terms of ensuring a nonpartisan public service might be considered the role of the executive, the minister, a minister in question. Do you have powers to investigate a minister in terms of the decision-making process for a staffing, a hiring process?
We, according to our Act, we can investigate. We investigate appointment processes, and in the context of an appointment process, if necessary, we can for example, interview or ask questions of anyone who was involved in the process, including a minister.
Thank you very much. Would you be able to describe to the committee any elements of the Act or the procedures available to you through legislation or otherwise that may be frustrating your attempts or of concern to you to be able to get to do a complete and full job? Are there any elements of the Act that you would like to advise the committee should be reviewed, or any amendments that you would like to have considered?
Thank you, Mr. President, for the question. I mean, that's certainly a question I would want to give thought to, but I could say at this moment nothing has come to light vis-a-vis our investigations powers.
Thank you very much. Okay. That's good, Mr. Chair.
Merci. Donc, on passe maintenant.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to Mr. Trottier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Thank you for coming in today to speak about this important issue. I think last time we spoke in front of this committee was a couple of years ago when you were newly appointed, and it's good to see you back. It's also good to see some, I think, some positive trends. I always appreciate looking at, what's happening year over year, but I also appreciate in your report you've got some longer-term trends. And one figure that intrigued me in particular was figure 6 in your report, where you talk about the appointments under the Public Service Employment Act of new indeterminate employees by fiscal year. And it goes all the way back to 1993. And so this interesting trend of, there's actually a very similar level of appointments in the year 1996-97, 2,966 appointments, and it compares almost exactly to 2012-13, 2,949. There was a crest of 20,087 in 2008-9. Can you describe some of the factors that are causing those trends? And is 2012-13, I mean, obviously there's some things related to the Deficit Reduction Action Plan that are going on. Is it a very similar set of circumstances to what was taking place in 1996-97 under the program review?
Thank you for that. I'm not sure I could give you a full account of all of the reasons. There were, as well as the things that you have mentioned, different eras of growth and downsizing within the federal public service. That chart covers a very long period of time. There also were some reorganizations of government departments that affected that. where some departments were put in and outside of the Public Service Employment Act.
Okay. And with respect to the crescendo, the peak in 2008, 2009 of 20,087, is some of that related to things like the stimulus program, or what was going on with the fairly dramatic increase in new appointments in that year?
We'll ask my colleague, Madame Laurando, to comment on that.
Please.
We can't say for sure that it would be strictly associated with the Economic Action Plan, but there was more staffing activity at the time, and the figures don't necessarily adequate. We can disaggregate what is strictly for the Economic Action Plan, but we certainly have seen an increase in the staffing actions associated to that period.
Okay. Now, one of the positive trends you mentioned in your presentation was how the public service is now opportunities are opened up to Canadians from farther afield. And I think that's really important, that all Canadians from coast to coast to coast really feel that this is their government, that they're not excluded from some of the opportunities that exist within the public sector. Beyond technology and the ability to communicate with people about opportunities, what kinds of measures is the public sector taking to ensure that people from all regions of the country have access to those opportunities to work in the public sector?
Thank you for that question. I would say one of the most important policies is the National Area of Selection Policy, which has been in place for a number of years, and that policy does provide that for external appointments, that people from all across the country have a chance to compete for those appointments. And then, thanks to the efforts of my predecessor and my colleague, Mr. Tom, who managed this area, we have really made advances in using internet-based testing and other technologies to allow more Canadians to easily access jobs. In some cases, they can take tests from their home, and that just provides, in general, much greater access.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned in your presentation that student hiring was down, but still 9,500 students were still hired for part-time and summer employment. Is most of that in Parks Canada, or what are the departments where those students might have the opportunity to work for the public sector?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I could send a list to the committee because I'm sure we have a detailed list, which I don't have with me today. But that hiring takes place all across the public service. I can't say off the top of my head which departments. It's probably in proportion to somewhat to the size of the departments. But even our own department, we do hire summer students as well.
Okay. Well, I just want to get a general sense of, are some of these cases were they summer hires looking to fill in for people while they're on vacation, and does this represent a good summer experience for them where they can subsequently get a full-time position with the public sector?
It does represent a lot of summer employment and part-time employment throughout the year. And under the Public Service Employment Act, there is a policy in place, and it's part of a Treasury Board policy as well, that allows students under certain circumstances, providing they meet merit, to be bridged into the public service. And so this is a really important source of renewal for the public service.
Merci, Monsieur Trottier.
Thank you, Mr. Trottier. Your time is up, so we'll go to Ms. Day. 5 minutes. Thank you very much. I would like to come back to what one of the members across the way said. They asked about the number of Francophones and the number of Anglophones, and you talked about 21% of Francophones and 68% of Anglophones, and then you talked about the member asked about the National Capital Region. But there are 700,000 Francophones in Ontario. Are they well represented in the public service? Even if we know that it is merit, that appointments are merit-based, is there some kind of obligation to respond to a Francophone from outside of Quebec in French?
Merci beaucoup pour cette question.
Thank you very much for the question. I'm going to ask my colleague, Ms. Laurando, to respond to your question. First, you said 21%, but it's actually 31.8% of Francophones and some 68% of Anglophones. In terms of representation, I would say that these are figures that we have, but that belong to the Treasury Board Secretariat, so it is in their annual report from the official languages section. In terms of representation, the determination of the linguistic abilities for positions is based on the Treasury Board's definition of the need to have bilingual positions in certain positions, whether it be for internal or public service, or rather service to the public. So does that mean that Franco-Ontarians, Franco-Manitobans, Francophones outside of Quebec, will they be answered in French across the country? According to the Treasury Board policy, and I don't want to go too far, but in areas where there is a bilingual area where services are provided to the public, Francophones can receive answers in French, but it has to be designated bilingual. For example, people in Ontario have the right to be served, for example, with regard to payroll in the language of their choice. And when we talk about employment equity, we see that Table 6 of page 31 in French, we can see that Aboriginals, persons with disabilities, and members of visible minorities, as well as women, represent a certain number of people. So this is between 2010-2013, and when we come to women, it says SO, 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 or rather not available. So NA, NA, NA. Woman is a woman, a man is a man. I think that should be able to be calculated. So are there still equal opportunity employment programs for men and women? Could you enlighten us on that table? I don't find that is number. Could you tell me what page it is? It's page 31 in French of the report. Table 6. Maybe what I can say in general is that in order to abide by our obligations with regard to the Public Service Employment Act, there are measures that can be used to staff positions when, for example, for women, if there is a group where there is a gap, we can use the flexibility provided for in the legislation to fix this problem. Do they use access programs? For example, positive discrimination? Do you mean for women? Yes, for women. Or for Aboriginals? No, we don't have positive discrimination programs. There are mechanisms that where there are gaps, as Ms. Robinson explained, for employment equity, there are mechanisms to ensure proper representation. For women, there are certain positions in certain occupational sectors, such as engineers, where there are certain gaps, and the mechanisms are there in order to increase the number of women. You're talking about non-traditional occupations? Yes, exactly. Now, for example, Aboriginals, do you have objectives that you have to meet? There are no objectives other than to try to ensure representation of workforce availability, what is available in the labor force. So we don't have any hard targets as such, but in general, the policy is that the departments must match the workforce availability with the labor force, and with regard to Aboriginal groups, the representation is where it should be. Thank you very much, Ms. Day. And now we're going to go to Mr. Cannon for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for appearing here again. And just starting off on Chapter 4, page 79, Table 21 of the report, and it's Public Service Commission investigations into appointment processes. Talks about 228 cases completed in 2012-13, and then you have breakdown accordingly. Under there is 126 cases closed at intake. So would that be the fact there was, just trying to clarify what the difference is between those intake and those that are unfounded?
Thank you for the question. The ones that would be closed at intake, those would be cases that our jurisdictions directorate and our investigations function would examine, and we would have determined that we either don't have the jurisdictions or we don't have grounds to launch an investigation. Under the law, of course, we must respect those two principles.
Okay. Thank you. And the 44 investigations founded, just trying to clarify then, it says could be somebody that used false educational or professional credentials. Then can you, they're obviously they're dismissed then, or not hired, or What's the consequence?
It would depend on the circumstances. Of the 44 cases in fraud, I don't know exactly the number, but as I mentioned earlier, there were 9 that resulted in 9 revocations. I'm not sure if those were all related to fraud, but there were 9 appointments that were revoked in 12-13. The other cases of fraud would include things like, for example, under the Public Service Employment Act, cheating on an exam would constitute fraud under the Act, or we've seen cases where people may falsify test results. Those cases, depending on the nature of the problem that was identified, the corrective measure could include revocation. And some people, these are persons who have not yet been appointed to the public service. We might find fraud before the appointment has been made, and so in some of those cases, you'll see a corrective measure that we use is for those individuals. Often, what we'll say is that you can't. It's like having a note on your file for a certain period of time, and if you want to apply for a job in public service, it would be disclosed that this fraud had been committed to anyone who was looking to hire you for a job. So there's different measures depending on the case.
So there's just 238 files that you did a review for under your portfolio in this past year.
That would be our investigation mandate is limited to transactions related to appointments in the public service.
Approximately how many?
The question, there was 228 cases were completed, yes, in 2012-13.
So then who's responsible for the other, you said there's 200,000, that falls within each department and each manager then to?
There's 200,000 public servants who are employed under the Act. There's in the range of 100,000 staffing transactions each year. And so that just was put there to give you a sense of the scope of the number of transactions, to put the 44 fraud cases really in context, to say that it is problematic that we've had 44 cases of fraud, or 44 cases, but in the context of 100,000 staffing transactions, what we're saying is that most of the transactions are not problematic in our view, and that things are generally sound in the staffing system.
Okay, thank you. Just a question, the definition of indeterminate. Where did that come from?
I'm not sure of the origins of that phrase, and I agree it's sometimes difficult to understand. I think it's in the Act, but I couldn't say that for sure. But it means permanent hire. Someone
that would be more common sense,
yes.
To say a permanent hire.
Yes, thank you. I would agree with that comment. I believe my colleague is telling me it is what's in the Act, but it does refer to permanent hires.
Thanks. The question about employment equity groups, what's the number and how has that changed over the years?
The employment equity, there are 4 groups under the Employment Equity Act: Aboriginal people, persons with disabilities, members of visible minorities, and women. And I think those groups have been fairly consistent over the years. We share this area of responsibility with the Treasury Board, and the Treasury Board has general responsibilities with respect to employment equity. Because the Commission is responsible for appointments under the Public Service Employment Act, our main responsibility is to ensure that the appointments are barrier-free, and that where necessary, for example, with persons with disabilities, that we ensure that the appointment process itself provides accommodation where necessary to ensure that everybody is on a level playing field when it comes to appointments that are being made under the Act.
Persons with disability, we have trying to make a conscious effort to hire persons with disabilities and also Aboriginal. Have you been able to quantify that success in that hiring process?
If we look at overall at the population data, which is issued by Treasury Board rather than the Commission, though I think we can say we are making good progress. As my colleague, Madame Laurendeau, just mentioned, where we still see some gaps and have more work to do is generally at the most senior levels in government and in certain occupational groups. So our work more and more is targeted is focused on targeting those areas where we still have to make progress to ensure. Our job is to make sure the appointment mechanisms are in place to reach our objectives. And then there's many others with responsibilities, including ensuring that there's accommodation when necessary. There's special programs, developmental programs. There's a whole range of measures that can be used to ensure we meet our targets overall.
Merci.
Thank you for your efforts to modernize our federal workforce and beneficial for all Canadians. Thank you very much.
Merci, M. Cannon. Et pour terminer rapidement.
Thanks, Mr. Cannon. To close very quickly, supplementary from Ms. Day. Yes, I have time, Mr. Chair. Yes. Okay, to come back to women into appointments. In senior and upper management levels, I'm thinking of certain departments and Parliament itself. People who make decision-making positions, are there women? Do women have the same representation, or if not, what is the percentage of women in such positions? I do not have that information with me today, but I can send that information to the committee and contact my colleague at the Treasury Board Secretariat who is responsible for having that information as concerns employment equity. Thank you very much for the answer and for any additional questions or data, you can submit that to the clerk. So I would like to thank you once again for your presence here today. I want to wish you very happy holidays, especially to Ms. Laurando, who, as you know, is on her last day of work today with the Public Service Commission. So congratulations and on your new role, and to all members of the committee, happy holidays, and to the people, our support staff, thank you very much, happy holidays, and have a great happy new year 2014, and all those who support the committee members, our staffers, thank you very much, happy holidays, and we'll see you in 2014, members of the committee. Mr. Trottier, did you have anything to say? No, just happy holidays and best wishes to everyone. All right, we'll see you in 2014. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.